Well, good morning. As you're signing in and jumping on, again, we encourage you to put your name and um, the name of your ministry, your where you're from in the world, and how long you've been with GC into the chat, and the map software will capture that immediately and put your location on the map so you can see where you're coming in from and where others are coming in from, and perhaps if meet someone in your own city who's part of the GC family. My name is Willie Reimer, and my role with the Great Commission Foundation is I serve as the Chief Impact Officer and excited to host this morning's presentation. And we've had a great time in this series. This is number 3 out of 4 in our series on how to equip ministries in the different aspects of fundraising. And we're very excited to have our presenter with us today. But before I introduce our wonderful presenter. You'll get to hear from our president, K.R. Davidson, and I'm just going to give a minute or two for a few more people to sign in. And again, if you're just coming on, I encourage you to put your name, the name of your ministry, your location, and how long you've been with the Great Commission Foundation into the chat, and our software will pick that up and we will show the map of that online so you can meet other people and see where people are signing in from. There's Central Canada and the US, and there's our North American context. So I'm in Calgary, so you can see me on the left side. There's a W there. That's where I am uh, in beautiful Calgary, Alberta, uh, where we finally have some decent weather, which we are very grateful for. Oh, Victoria Graham, Winnipeg. That's where I grew up. And I heard it's been miserable there lately, from what my family tells me. So I hope your spring comes soon. I am going to turn things over to K.R. Davidson, our president, and he has a few words of introduction for you.
Yeah, thanks, Willie. And thank you to everyone here. It's just a pleasure to be able to see all of the ministries that we're connected with together. And the reason why we're doing this is just to be able to understand that as much as we serve, often behind the scenes, we also serve to be a connecting point for all of the ministries that we're connected with. And so we just love that you guys are here and able to interact, at least on our visual map. We're also so pleased to be able to bring such wonderful speakers together just because of the size and scope of the amount of ministries that we serve. So we're uh, absolutely privileged to have Greg with us. He's also a personal friend, and Willie will expand on the introduction. But just want to convey that our heart is here so that we can release you to be able to do what God's called you to do to advance the kingdom. And so part of our strategic initiative is to encourage collaboration and collective impact, which is one of Willie's responsibilities. And so this is one of those initiatives. And so we just want to say thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to see you. Over to you, Willie.
All right, thanks, K.R. So it's my privilege to introduce you to Greg Pennoyer, our presenter this morning. And just before I do that, I'm going to remind you again, uh, in the chat, there's a link to Slido, and that's where you can ask your questions that we will address at the end of Greg's presentation in a bit of a Q&R time, which will drill down into the specific things that you have the questions you have that are pertinent to your situation. Excited to introduce Greg Pennoyer to you. Greg has a long history of working in ministry development, fundraising, and I've had the privilege of getting to know Greg over the last couple of years and have really enjoyed our friendship, but also our joint passion for this area of ministry. And just recognizing that this is fundraising and not just fundraising, it's ministry and ministering to philanthropists, as well as, of course, the greater impact that philanthropists have in the kingdom of God. So, Greg, got to make sure I get your current title right. Special Counsel to the President of Prison Fellowship International. Did I say that right? Oh, you're muted, Greg. And and I invited Greg to come and present because I've experienced Greg in his ministry setting firsthand. And when I thought about how do we best serve our community and GC ministries, and one of the things that we do as smaller ministries often is we are talking to philanthropists, to donors in small contexts. And Greg does this exceptionally well. And I said, Greg, I think you need to share what you do with the rest of the folks in our community, because I think we have a great opportunity to learn from you. So I'm going to pray for Greg, and then I'm going to turn things over to him. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for everyone who's online from around the world, and for those who will view this later. And Father, I pray that as we are listening to what you present to Greg, that you will speak to him and through him and help us apply the things that we learn to our local contexts and ministries. And it will be for your glory and for greater impact for the gospel around the world. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
It's all yours, Greg.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes.
Right. Um, thank you, Willie, for creating this series of workshops. I've attended all of them, and I have found them very useful. So thank you for that. Also, thanks to Ellen and Greg, who gave the first two workshops. Learned a lot from those. I admire these three people very much and am grateful to be included among them. And I hope that what follows adds to the contribution that Greg and Helen has made. And there's some repetition, some overlap, but I think the perspective that I bring is maybe just a different coming at it slant. This is my first time giving this talk. I've been working for a couple of weeks on this, and it has come out of great joy and great sorrow in my experience as a fund development officer. So it's got that tenor to it, that kind of patina to it. So I'll talk more about this. I don't want it to be a significant part of our conversation, but this does come from both the joys and sorrows that I've experienced over these last 30 years. And I found the task immensely useful, and found that I was not behaving as a fund development officer the way in which I'm going to define today in many ways. So it was a great time to get back to what I believe is critical to sustainable long-term fund development that is rooted in the Spirit of our Lord Jesus Christ. I was driving somewhere with a colleague of mine that a couple of you know in this gathering, and we had a long road trip. I think we feel it's the longest road trip ever from Medicine Hat to Calgary. And he said, Greg, you have a very calming voice. And we've been talking about something and really getting into a great conversation. And I thought he was being encouraging, so I just kept talking, and soon realized that he wasn't responding to my questions. And I turned to the right, and there he was, fast asleep. So I have my eyes on you. If I look down to the left, I'm not only looking at the PowerPoint presentation, but also to all of you, just to make sure that none of you that you're still awake. I want to begin with a word about what this session is and is not. Willie asked for something practical, and I want to do that, but I'm going to take a few minutes to lay some groundwork before we get there. Not because theory is more important than practice, but because practice without the right grounding beneath it rarely lasts. I'm going to start with a story, not a fundraising story, but a generosity story, a hospitality story. And it's not really a story, it's an invitation to you to enter into a space in your memory, in the fleshy tablets of your mind, to think back about a time when someone welcomed you into a room and you felt almost immediately that the room was incomplete without you, not because of what you brought, um, not because of what you could do for them, but simply because of who you were. They were genuinely glad you existed. There was a sense of profound welcome and ability to be yourselves. Just think of that. Can you remember the moment? I can remember a couple times in my life where I had that experience. I want you to hold on to that feeling that it gives you when you think of that experience of being so welcomed that you are free to be yourself. And just hold on to that. Many of us work in a quiet tension. We love the work that we do. We've started our ministry because of the people that we serve and the area of the kingdom of God in which we live and work. But fundraising, that part where we have to go to people and ask for money, often feels like the thing that takes us away from the passionate thing that we were called to do, the thing that we love. It's become a necessary burden, a distraction. But what if that feeling, that burden, that distraction, is not a sign of something being wrong with fundraising, but that we have been thinking about it incorrectly or seeing donors incorrectly? This conversation today is about that, a way of seeing and practice where fundraising becomes a gift to the person that you're engaging with. A few qualifiers before I get into the substance of this. Originally, the title was The Generous Host, and that's entirely appropriate given Willie's experience with me and me with him. I'd like to suggest a slight change. I've called it The Generous Fundraiser, and I've called it that because fundraising, properly understood, is as much about giving as it is receiving. The fundraiser who appreciates a patron with genuine generosity of spirit, with curiosity, with care, attentiveness, and real investment in that person's life is not merely raising money. They're offering something. They're offering belonging. They're offering meaning. They're offering a place at a table that matters. They're offering a real part of life-giving work. That's the generous fundraiser. This is not about formation, not about performance, not about no, this is about formation, not about performance, and not about formula. What I'm about to invite us into may sound idealistic, and the last thing I want to do is heap on you the burden that idealism can be when people are so busy in practical things in their ministry and working on behalf of the people of this world. So let me be clear about what this is not. It's not a new list of things to do. It's not higher standard of performance. It's not about formula. We are talking here about formation, the slow formation of a culture, slow formation of instinct, of posture, of character that changes how we show up in patron relationships. Not because we learned a better technique, not because we became something different, but because we have changed in our own hearts, in our understanding of who the person is that we're dealing with. Formation is slow, it's ongoing, and largely unseen, but over time, it changes the way in which we see people and money and the work of fundraising. So this is a long-term process, as formation is, and the thing is many of you here will instinctively know what I'm talking about through this talk, because your work is about people and for people. You already know the place of spiritual formation in your leadership and in your mission. I'm simply placing that formation into an area that many people experience as uncomfortable or distracting or frustrating, and that's fundraising. I also want to say that this is not about watering down the work of fundraising. We still need to meet. We still need to share the story. We still need to ask. We still need to engage in excellent fundraising practices. This is about the fundraiser, the person, and how they see the patron and how they see fundraising. It is about us becoming the kind of person, and I include myself in this because I'm engaged in fundraising on a regular basis. It is about us becoming the person whose ask is itself experienced as a gift to the person that we're asking. And the last thing I want to say is how unseen the work that I'm talking about is. The pressures of payroll, programming, organization, sustainability are real, but the unseen formation of the fundraiser is not a luxury. It can't take second place to those other pressures. It is the foundation upon which sustainable patron relationships are built. We cannot manufacture externally how we behave with patrons what has not been cultivated internally. My wife and I have a few works of art, original works of art on our walls. It's not because we're wealthy, we just have friends who are artists and they've given us their works. One of those artists spent years learning to draw before they began to paint. That work happened quietly, unseen in a studio, and it's essential work to good painting. It's like doing in figure skating where you have to do the figure eights, which are so boring, but to do them well means what you do in your practices on a daily basis, contribute to your success on the ice and your performances. The other artists that we have in our dining room never cultivated that hidden discipline of drawing. And you can tell the difference. We don't have words for it. We can't explain it, but you can see it. Fundraising is public work, like those works of art. People see it. And what we cultivate privately, our posture toward patrons, our attentiveness, our generosity, our patience, our honesty, profoundly shapes what people experience when they are in the room. So the key point here is the unseen formation of the fundraiser eventually becomes visible in every patron relationship. Okay, that was just the opening. Now let's move into the heart of this. There are three sections that I want to deal with. I want to talk about seeing how we see. There's a theologian who once said that all of Christian spirituality is learning to see God, to see yourself, and to see the other. And then we're going to get into the practical, and Willie will rub the sweat off his forehead when I get into that. Oh, finally, he's talking about what I asked him to talk about. And then we're going to talk about formation, some practical steps that you can do to cultivate within you and your organization that kind of posture and culture that sees patrons for who they are. One thing about structures and practices, very, very important, but they only carry weight when they emerge from a genuine shift in perception. Otherwise, they become tactics, and patrons can feel the difference, like those works of art. They feel it. They may not be able to put a word to it, but they feel it. I want to look at the triangle that we work in. Every charity lives inside a triangle of board, staff, and beneficiary. And by the way, I use triangles and refer to triangles a lot because I'm Trinitarian, and so I think this idea of the Trinity has much more effect than we might imagine in our daily life and in our organizations. Everything naturally flows towards the beneficiary. Board, staff work, board with staff, board's direct effect on beneficiaries and involvement in those that they serve. The staff, of course, working with beneficiaries. But where's the patron sit? Usually outside the triangle, a necessary visitor, approached when the tank runs low, thanked, then largely left alone until the next ask. And this isn't malicious. We don't do this. It's just simply the model that has been given us over the years. But it does have a cost. Now imagine something different. What if the person is part of the triangle? Not merely as a funder of the mission, but as a participant and a recipient within it. What if they too had something to receive, something at stake, something our community uniquely offers? Doesn't matter where we put them in this triangle, as long as they're inside it. I put them in this place of the beneficiary because I truly believe, my perspective is, and this is how I try to work, I fall short in many ways, is that I want to be giving to them and treating them as one of our beneficiaries, as those we have come to serve. If I'm building a school in Africa, I want to care for those students. I want to care for those teachers. I want to care for that institution. And equally, I want to care for the patrons that have come alongside of us to give to that and make that that program possible. So the key point here is that we may position patrons in our imaginations, or how we position patrons in our imaginations shapes how we communicate, plan, and ask. When the patron moves from outside to inside that triangle, fundraising becomes an invitation rather than an extraction. What generous hospitality actually is. Before we can talk about patrons with that, we need to recover something old, the spiritual art of hospitality. And by hospitality, I don't mean just entertaining, a nice table, warmth, good food. Those are maybe all part of it. I mean something much deeper. A hospitality means something much more profound. In the ancient world, hospitality was one of the primary ways communities formed across difference. The host did not simply provide a meal. The host created the conditions for belonging. Abraham welcomes the strangers at Mamre. Jesus eating with the tax collectors and sinners. It wasn't just the table. It wasn't just the home. It wasn't just the food. It's the fact that he invited people that were so contrary to his life and to the life of his disciples, and he engaged them and he treated them like human beings. The early church gathering across divisions of ethnicity and class. Biblical hospitality is not primarily an event. It is a posture. It's how we stand and look towards the other. It's a way of seeing the other and seeing ourselves. So the key point here is hospitality is the creation of meaningful belonging. Remember that story that way back at the beginning that I asked you to enter into? You walked into a place where you felt profoundly welcome and free to be yourself. This is what it is here, meaningful belonging, the creation of a space where people are genuinely received rather than merely managed. Fundraising rooted in hospitality invites patrons into community rather than merely into giving. This next section is something that I have learned through personal experience, both failure and successes in the last 30 years. And it's kind of hard for us to see people of high net worth as people with wounds, people in need, people who we sometimes find it hard to see them as normal human beings, but in fact they are. Wealth is often lonely. it brings with it profound challenges. Challenges, family challenges, investment challenges, preserving the wealth, building the wealth, sharing the wealth, passing it on to next generations. I can say in this community that I have never met so many people, so many families where children are not talking to their parents as I have in families of wealth. The challenges, the difficulties that are brought are significant. And then you add to that the quiet questions they ask themselves when we come to them. Do they want me or what I can provide? Do they know the burden and the challenge of having wealth? Or do they just see my life as a life of ease? Over time, many people of wealth develop a sophisticated instinct for detecting when they are being approached instrumentally. They can pick up on those who only see the benefits of wealth and not the challenges. Henry Nouwen observed that some of the most isolated people in a community are often those who appear to need nothing. And it's partly because receiving requires vulnerability. And vulnerability in a world of uncertain motives, when they're constantly being approached by people whose motives is their wealth and not them, vulnerability becomes dangerous for them. Nouwen's deep insight in this is we do not minister from strength and wholeness. We minister from shared woundedness. He says that in his book, The Wounded Healer, the great illusion of leadership, he writes, is to think that man can be led out of the desert by someone who has never been there. We do not have the same experiences as people of wealth, but we do carry wounds. Our patrons carry wounds of loneliness, isolation, the exhaustion of being needed, the challenges of wealth. And we, fundraisers, who know something about pressure, fear, inadequacy, failure, and the burden of asking, are not so different from them. And it's in that shared humanity that we create genuine connection. But we must see first the wounds of those who we're asking. And that's why relationship is so important. This whole workshop is born out of my own failures, as I said at the beginning, as much as my successes. I've been fundraising since 1993. I've had major patrons who have become my closest friends during that time. I have also lost some of those friendships for reasons still to this day I do not fully understand why. I have had patrons accuse me of treating them like an ATM, using those exact words. But I've also had patrons tell me that even the things they supported that I brought to them that failed still shaped their lives in meaningful ways. They still recognize the profound value of our partnership because relationship was there. I may not have been their close friend, but they knew the posture of me and the organization with which I worked. So I share all of this not in having arrived, but out of great sorrow and some successes along the way. Fundraising is broken people dealing with broken people. So the key point here is when we recognize the humanity and woundedness we share with our patrons, the relationship begins to move from transaction toward mutual trust and care. I want to introduce you to an idea from a gentleman by the name of Owen Barfield, who now has left this world. He's one of the Inklings and a close friend of C.S. Lewis. But I'm going to begin with a story. Again, a story that's not really a story. It's really an invitation to you to enter into a space. Imagine your person of wealth invited to 2 dinners. At the first, you are welcomed warmly. The food is good. The evening is pleasant. But slowly you realize everyone is performing for you. The stories are polished. The needs feel packaged. And by the end of the evening, you realize you are not truly a guest. You are an audience. The second dinner, something is different. Someone says soon after you arrive, you two should know each other. Let me introduce you. The host speaks honestly about something difficult that they've experienced lately. Someone tells a story that is imperfectly told, but real. Someone asks how you're doing and actually wants to know. And somewhere during the evening, you realize, I belong here. And you experience that freedom of being yourself. You're the same person in both luncheons, in both stories. You have the same capacity to give in both circumstances, but they're entirely different experiences. And this is this idea of co-inherence. Jesus prays in John 17:21 that they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you. Now think of that triangle of the Trinity. Think of that idea of the Trinity, that they are one but three. This is co-inherence. And the reason I use the word co-inherence is it provides a kind of fresh way of thinking about this scripture. It's the idea that our lives genuinely overlap and shape one another. We're not individuals, that we are already participating in one another's stories, whether we acknowledge it or not. In this world of individualism and privacy and fences, we have a difficult time understanding this biblical concept of oneness. But in fundraising, and the great opportunity we have as fundraisers is to actually cultivate that idea that we are one. We're not different than the person on the other side of the table that we're asking to give us $100,000. They may have wealth, but with it comes a whole set of challenges that reminds them of their humanity. We may not have wealth, and with that comes a whole set of challenges that reminds us of our humanity. So the key point is that the healthiest patron relationships stop feeling transactional and begin feeling genuinely human. People support organizations differently when they experience real belonging. I also want to talk about the cycle of pressure. In Henry Nouwen's book, the Spirituality of Fundraising, which I hope you've all read, and if you haven't, you should. And if you have read it, read it again. He writes plainly that when we approach patrons primarily as solutions to our financial problems, we have already failed them, whether they give to us or not. This is rarely done with bad intentions. We as fundraisers sometimes do this because of the pressure and the cycle of pressure. And the cycle is familiar. The budget shortfall arrives. Urgency enters every conversation. The patron feels it. The relationship becomes transactional. The patron slowly pulls back, and the pressure on us increases. And then the cycle repeats itself. But the solution to this cycle is not working hard or working harder. The solution is formation. It is about us. We can't control their lives. We can't help them with their heart issues related to money. That's the work of God. But we can create an environment where they feel human, where they feel they belong, and where they feel free to be themselves. The cultivation of a posture capable of holding urgency, because it is urgent. We do need those funds, without becoming consumed by it. And there's a tension that we will always have after 30 years of trying to be a relationship-oriented fundraiser. I still feel the pressure and I still make mistakes because of that pressure. So the key point is the pressure cycle is not ultimately broken by harder work, but by a differently formed posture, how we see things, how we stand in front of others. Okay, now we've talked about seeing the donor, seeing ourselves, seeing God. Now let's look at practice. And the last section was about formation. It's about seeing and being. This section is about practice. And it's just an important note. Practices only carry weight. I've said this before, but I'm going to say this throughout. They only carry weight if the formation beneath them is real. So what I'm talking about here again is not techniques to manipulate people. They are structures that embody a genuinely different way of seeing patrons. Giving circles and fellowships. I'll tell you what they are specifically, but let me just kind of set that up a bit. Most organizations structure patron relationships like a pyramid. They have giving levels. I think we should be on the next slide. There we go. Giving levels, there's tiers, there's benefits. The structure quietly communicates transaction. But consider a giving fellowship, a named community with a rhythm, an identity, a belonging, and relationships. Not a VIP program, but a fellowship. People of all kinds of wealth coming together, some who can give at a more modest level and those who give it up at a higher level. As with the church, across class and culture. A giving fellowship invites patrons not merely to give, but to belong. So let me share with you what these are. I work with about 5 of them in Canada. We just started building them about 2 years ago, and it is very hard work, but my gosh, the outcomes are wonderful. It's the creation of a group of current or potential patrons coming together around one project. You start with a luncheon or a reception in somebody's home or breakfast meeting at your local Greasy Spoon. They gather regularly at a pace of their own choosing. At the first meeting, you introduce them to the project. You share with them what it's about, the impact that it'll have, the changes that it'll make, the transformation that it will create, and the cost of it. And then you gently invite them to consider, and we'll talk more about permission-based fundraising in a moment, but you ask permission, as we do, to connect with them, to ask them to give to this. So we put around the table a card and we just say, if this interests you, you want to have a conversation, fill this card out, which is just a name and an email address, that's it. And we'll be in touch and reach out to you. But it's what comes after that is really important. Certainly I do reach out and I follow up, but it's the fact that they're getting together with peers, others in their world who have found delight in a project that you have presented to them. They meet quarterly, they start cultivating friendships. We now have people getting together. They didn't know each other before the first giving fellowship, that luncheon that we had, and they now meet regularly. We have a group in Medicine Hat where what they've done is they pooled together to buy a house, renovate it, and sell it. And I think just recently, in the last week, it was sold. And the profits from that house are going entirely to the project that they've supported. So it's a way of bringing people together so that together they start thinking about what it is that they want to do. there's something that important happens at a luncheon or in a giving fellowship. The burden of giving becomes distributed. Most often, many donors, somebody comes to them and their approach to fund an entire project. Giving fellowships, it's shared. No one person has the burden. It's an easier entrance into engagement with you and with your organization. There's no pressure of major gifts. It's modest, solid gifts that enable you to reach the goal of funding this project. Patrons begin introducing others naturally to the program. We have that happening all the time. They're reaching out to their friends. Why don't you come and hear the story of this project we're working on? We'd love to have you to be part of it. And trust deepens. Can you go back to the benefits? I've lost this in my notes here, so I'm looking at the screen for a moment. The benefits to the patron, or what it offers the patron, is peer relationship, shared burden, safe motives. Again, that permission-based asking. They know that we're thinking about this, but we're not pressuring them into it. And then a sense of genuine belonging. But there's also benefits to your organization as well. And meaningful connection between you and a group of patrons. Now, one way that we do that is, we haven't done it always perfectly, but we're doing it more and more where we give plenty of time for those around the table to tell us their story. Not simply their names, but where did they come from? What shaped them? Why does this work matter to them? Or what their relationship with charities and what kind of other charities they're engaged in. Those conversations outlast even our program introduction. Sometimes we spend 45 minutes in a luncheon just with that opportunity for donors to share their story. And then we move on to tell the story of Prison Fellowship International. So the key point in the Giving Fellowship, it's patrons who genuinely belong, tend to give more consistently, more generously, and for long periods of time. And just as a practical note, when we establish a Giving Fellowship, it's for 3 years. They make a commitment to give an X number of dollars for each of the next 3 years. For PFI, our bottom level is 5,000. We generally ask for them to consider something between 5 and 25,000. But we'll also pursue somebody who might want to give more to create momentum so that it's an encouragement to others. And that's happened in a number of cities where a donor who loves the idea says, listen, I'd like to create some momentum here and I'd like to give more. So the Giving Fellowships create a kind of, there's an incentive to become creative on the part of the donors as well. And it's out of the give and take, the relationship, the back and forth between us and between them in creating a place for their peers to gather. And it's become a place of great meaning. Okay. Investing in the life of the patron. There have been charities that I have worked with who hate this idea of us giving somehow to patrons. Normally, what we provide patrons are reports, campaign documents, updates, appeals, and all of that matters. I'm not saying it's unimportant. It needs to be there. But the generous fundraiser also invests in the actual life of the patron. One of the most important shifts I think we need to make as fundraisers is learning to give something to our patrons. Not money, but primarily attention. That we attend to them in such a way that what you and I give them says, I heard you. A book connected to something that they mentioned. And just the other day, I sent a book that has absolutely nothing to do with Prison Fellowship International to somebody that we had recently met because he was really interested in and hadn't read it yet. And we had had a good conversation about it. A handwritten note, rarely done, mostly emails today, but a handwritten note that without any motive other than to connect with them as a friend. A phone call with no agenda, an introduction that could help them. I have done that many times in the past where somebody in a particular industry, I thought, hey, you two need to meet. So I do an email introduction, and there is fruit from that introduction. And there's a gratitude and it's a way of just saying to them, I heard you and I know who you are. I know what your interests are outside of Prison Fellowship International, and I want to help you. The central question becomes, does this interaction invest in the life of the patron or only draw from it? Healthy patron relationships eventually begin to feel reciprocal, a kind of back and forth. That is where the role of giving on the part of the generous fundraiser begins. It's reciprocal giving. And as we listen and as we attend and as we engage in their families and hear about their children going to the Zambia for a mission trip. And I said, wow, would you like to see some prisons while you're there and hear about Prison Fellowship International and just, get to see some of the ministry going on there. And we make the connection and it happens. And by the way, I saw somebody saying that they're going to Zambia or something and wanted to know if I could introduce them to Prison Fellowship Zambia. I'd be happy to, and I'm not sure, Willie, if we can make my email address available to people who may need it or want it. Happy to do that, though, if that's possible. So the key point is patrons who feel genuinely known and invested in give from a different place than patrons who feel managed. So to give back, to invest, to listen, to attend, and then to respond. Vision trips plus. So for most of us here, we take our patrons to wherever we're at in the world. Geographically, could be Vancouver, East Side, it could be Malawi, it could be a camp outside of the Muskokas, whatever ministry you're involved in. What you do, your place, the gift that you provide patrons is a gift of place. And the gift of place is the place in which you're doing your work. So you want to invite them, and I know many of you probably already do that. You want to introduce them to the place because people support your work differently when they see it, when they bear witness to the work that you do. But when we bring patrons into places where our work happens, we also create space for something that has nothing directly to do with our organization. They're human beings. They're curious. They're interested. So they're in a place in Vancouver East Side. Well, there's some incredible architecture if they're in architecture. There's some incredible photography museums. There's history. There's beauty. If you're if you have a camp in the mountains of the Rockies, there's a horseback ride into the mountains to just see and bear witness to the wonders of God. There's feasting, there's culinary adventures, there's shared delight, there's safaris if you're in Africa. Not that you have to pay for it because they'll pay for themselves, but that you create the opportunity because you see them as human beings. And it's not just, oh, maybe we should go for a safari because that would be nice at the end of this. No, it's an investment in time in them. And the conversations that take place in those other things become extraordinary. One of the things I didn't mention about gifts to patrons is I have done a series of tours in various parts of the world, an event on friendship in Oxford and Cambridge, where we had great conversations on the friendship between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. We did the 7 churches of Revelations in Turkey, and we took patrons there. Things that had nothing to do with the work that I'm doing, but had to do with them and cultivating and enriching their understanding of the world in which they give. There are many things that you can do that are tied with the things that you're already doing that can enrich their life. And so the key point here is patrons tend to form their deepest long-term commitments. Again, when they feel genuinely seen as a whole person, going into Rwanda and not just visiting the school, but going to the Genocide Museum, meeting with a minister of justice, as we often do. We'll take our donors to meet with significant people in a country to expand their understanding of the world. And then finally, in this section, permission-based asking. When we ask, we should be clear and bold. But in order to be clear and bold without offense, there needs to be conditions surrounding it. There needs to be a context. There needs to be a culture. Most asks carry that hidden pressure of urgency, expectation, the inability to say no comfortably for the philanthropist. These approaches may work in the short term, and they do. They do work. We see it all the time. But they also damage relationships over time. And I know that there are people out there who no longer engage with me because the relationship has been damaged. I don't know necessarily who they are, maybe 1 or 2, but I also hear from patrons when they are mistreated by other organizations. And the mistreatment isn't malice, it's not intentional, but the focus, there's been no formation of the internal part of their lives as fundraisers. They damage relationships over time. Permission-based asking looks different. First of all, it asks permission, and I now do that almost all the time. I hope I do it all the time. Where I say, are you open to us making an ask? Or as in our giving fellowships, they just fill out a card, and if they don't, we don't bother them. We don't pursue them. We don't come after them because they've made it clear that they're not interested. They haven't given us permission. Advance notice, like lots of advance notice on, in 6 months, we're going to be needing this. Would you be open to us beginning a conversation today about this gift that we need down the road? Private settings, wonderful places where people can hear each other, especially as you're dealing with older folks like myself. Noisy environments are hard to engage in. Clear invitations, absolutely. Patrons want to know what is it that you're looking for, but they want to know in that broader, richer context, where they have been given also the freedom to decline. I tell the donors who I get close to, I tell them I'm the easiest guy in the world to say no to, because I take no offense. That's taken a long time to get there. The other thing is to give them time to think. We don't need to know tomorrow. Why don't we have another conversation in a few weeks? You tell me when that would be helpful. So this kind of permission-based asking is moving in slowly. It's a gentler approach. The key point here is patrons who experience freedom and respect in the ask are far more likely to become long-term partners, and I have experienced that. I've also experienced people they feel it easier and acceptable to say no. And in fact, I have grown in relationship with some of those people who said no to the projects I'm working on. Okay, the third and final part is formation. We've talked about seeing how we see the donor, how we see ourselves, how we see this world that we work in, called fundraising. We've talked about some of the very different practices that we can engage in that are simple. The giving fellowships, well, that's not simple. Those take work, but the outcomes are incredible. giving, being a generous fundraiser, giving into the life of the patron outside of the interests necessarily of your organization. And now formation. How do we get to this place? This final section is a bit different. It's not about organizational strategy. It's about who we are becoming and how do we become that. Because every practice that we've talked about, the giving fellowships, giving gifts to others, even permission-based asking, can be performed cynically or be received cynically if it's not coming from a heart that is in the process of transformation into a generous fundraiser. Beautiful dinners, thoughtful notes, giving fellowships. Sometimes people get a lot of that, but if it's not coming from that heart, and if the posture, if the space that we create isn't that human space, the donors become cynical. That has to be cultivated. So here's 3 ways that I recommend the cultivation of. Number 1 is pray for patrons by name. This is the most obvious thing. I know I'm just stating the obvious, but I really mean it. That every day or every week, your team is praying for all your donors by name, with no agenda, no, not simply for their generosity, but for their marriages, for their children, their fears, their loneliness. And it's not because we're just looking for changes in the life of the person we're praying for. Prayer is actually the way in which we change, and prayer changes how we see people. It becomes increasingly difficult to instrumentalize someone, to just use them as an utility when you're praying for them and praying for them regularly. So the key point of that is prayer transforms the fundraiser before it transforms the fundraising relationship. I'll say it again, prayer transform the fundraiser before it transforms the fundraising relationship. The next act or the next practice is patron-centered retreat, where you use a fundraiser, take 2 to 3 days. You get away, you might bring a board member, might be on your own, might bring your CEO, or if you are the CEO and fundraiser, you bring a board member, a chair, and you just get away, not to strategize, but to reflect. Who are the people making this work possible? What are they carrying? What's on their shoulders? Where have we reduced them to capacity and usefulness? What might it look like to genuinely care for them? Bring your patron list, bring your journal, bring Nouwen's book on the spirituality of fundraising, and allow yourself to see your patrons again. Take the time to bear witness to who they are through prayer, through reflection, through going down the list and remembering the stories they've told you. I have a book of all the stories that I've been told by my patrons. That I don't use computer or AI. I just use an old fountain pen in a book. But their stories are there, and I captured them because they're important to me. I remember one major donor in an organization I worked with before PFI loved film, and it was back in the days of DVDs. He and I started this back and forth, sending each other DVDs of the best films we've ever seen, and it just became this very touching and moving relationship. And every time we get together, we get to talk about it and not just about the organization. The third area is creating a community of practice. We don't do this much as fundraisers because we're in such a competitive world. We think that these are our donors and I'm going to protect them. And we create these walls and barriers with other fundraisers. I don't think that we should be sharing our donor list with other fundraisers unless we are given permission to do so. And then I think we absolutely should. But we can at least get together to share the pressures that we bear as fundraisers. Consider forming a small cohort around you with donors or fundraisers from other organizations, not to compare donor lists, not to trade tactics, but to reflect together on the posture that we've talked about, the formation that we've talked about, and integrity, to pray for one another, to keep asking the hard question, are we becoming the kind of people our patrons can trust, that they can feel in communion with, that they can feel free with, free to be human, free to share their life, free even to say no? So the key point here is healthy fundraising cultures are strengthened when leaders pursue formation together rather than alone. Closing. We began with a story about a kind of welcome, someone who made us feel that the room was incomplete without us, that we completed this group or this gathering, that we were wanted, that we were seen and attended to, and not just the audience. Our patrons are hungry for that as well. Not because they're fragile, but because they're human. They have the hunger to belong just like you and I do. They have the hunger to matter just like you and I do. To participate in something that's real, with real people, for real reasons, to give life to the world. And we, of all people, you and me, fundraisers, possess the theological resources, the relational context, and the meaningful mission to offer it because of our work, because of how our work is shaping us and everything that we do every day, not just the fundraising, but those we care for. The mission and vision of the organization requires of us a certain spiritual formation. We now need to take that further and apply it to patrons. We have a job to do. We need to raise funds. We need to ask clearly. Some patrons will prefer a more transactional relationship, and that is entirely their prerogative. But ultimately, this conversation is not primarily about the patron. It is about us, the kind of fundraiser we are becoming, the kind of person that we're becoming. Whether the person sitting across the table experiences something increasingly rare in our world, someone genuinely glad they exist, someone who has thought about them, someone who is not merely there for what they can provide. The generous fundraiser is not the one who asks the most skillfully. It is the one who has become most genuinely giving. And as a result, their ask becomes a kind of gift. Thanks.
I guess I should unmute. Thank you so much, Greg. Now I want to invite people again to put your questions in the Slido link that's in your chat, and we will jump into the question and response portion of our time together before we wrap things up for today. Okay, we do have one question. It's from Anonymous. So we'll pass on your email. It's a question. Greg, I do prison, police, military, chaplaincy, trauma training in Zambia. So how can I connect with you after the conference regarding that work?
Can you, is there a way for my email address? I don't mind it going out
Sure,
to
we
them.
can post that in the chat.
Great.
That would be fine. Another question, how can organizations build a sense of belonging and community for online donors, especially in Africa where hospitality is best expressed physically or in person?
Yeah, that's hard, but there are creative ways to do it. I work mostly in the mid to major area of fundraising and not in mass or online. But unique notes that go out to your online donors. in how you talk to them and how you share with them and what you say and what you provide for them. Maybe you send them something that has nothing to do with the ministry, but just for them as human beings, as ways of saying thanks. A book that relates to their own formation, spiritual formation. Um, there are many ways in which to work with a more mass audience, an online audience.
Something that struck me as you talked about the idea of retreat and prayer for your patrons. How much have you used um, text for more personal, intimate encouragement or conversation?
All the time.
Because
I only use it when it's rooted in a more in a relationship that has had plenty of face-to-face time.
okay, so yeah, you
But
build relationship and then follow up.
yeah, I often will send maybe a 10, 11 word note to people who I've gotten to know. Just thinking of you today, praying for you. I know, your son is navigating graduation or whatever. Just letting you know that you're on our hearts. And it's a text because they get the text right away, the email sometimes much later.
Yeah, just as you talked about praying for patrons and that whole relational piece.
Yeah,
At least I find often then the spirit kind of pokes me,
right.
and a name drops into my mind, and I don't know why.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'll just say, praying for you. Not sure what's up
yeah,
today.
yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
and you've built the format for that because you're taking the time and space.
Yes.
So speak to the what you describe, this beautiful journey. Uh, there would be a synonym for it as well. That would be the word slow.
It is
Uh,
slow.
right. And of course, and the other one I think would be is intentional.
Yeah.
Um, so speak a bit, and you mentioned it. You talked about urgency without being consumed.
Yes. Um, so I don't do this perfectly. I have higher ups who have expectations of me, and I have to deliver on those. I'm doing my best to build strong relationships, but um, I work in the mid to major donor world. I have 80 actual donors that I have engaged with and another 120 that I am cultivating relationships with that aren't yet donors. So that's 200 people in my list that I'm working with all the time. I can't be that. I don't like that. I think I need to be careful because this DFI is a great organization. I can't say anything negative about it. I can't. I just can't think of anything. But it is a huge load when you think of this kind of formative fundraising. Um, and I think that is a challenge with our world as a whole, our need to grow quickly. I ask sometimes on a first meeting, I because of our need, but it's generally led by the Spirit. And when I feel that it is acceptable to do so, I don't want to break the relationship. But I went through an experience just recently. Gentleman was asked by a friend of ours to join, a friend of the ministry PFI to go with us to South America. And we had a lovely time. We took a few days after the vision trip to be in Bogota or Cartagena just to enjoy the history there. And then we came home and I followed up with him a couple times and invited him to lunches, some of our Giving Fellowship lunches. And eventually he said, Greg, I really feel like you're treating me like an ATM. And that was uh, that was the hardest thing to hear because I thought we had cultivated a relationship and it was time. So this takes time. And depending on the other person and depending on your stuff and their stuff, things sometimes don't work out. Now we've walked through that and talked through it, and we're going to be approaching it a different way at a different time. So it wasn't lost, but it was, this takes time. Becoming the person that we've described in the last 45 minutes is really a lifelong journey.
So tied to that, we had a question. It says ours is an annual event ministry, teams of professionals to train chaplains. Ideas as to frequency and types of connections to build donor relationships. So it's kind of what you're talking about there.
Yeah. Well, there's a system, the tier, when we refer to the tier system, that the more they give, the higher the frequency, and the less they give, the less the frequency. Um, and I understand that. I think there's a practical understanding there, and we should attend to that as best we can. But I find that some of my closest relationships are with people who give in the middle, but they give consistently and they've given for years. Or sometimes those who have given a lot give interim. They'll give for a year or two and then stop. Um, so this is the work of the Holy Spirit. There's no process that is exactly right here. It's about where we're headed. It's about the destination, and the destination is to be that person who's filled with the Holy Spirit, who's gone through and is going through and ongoing through that process of formation, so that every person we sit down with, no matter how frequently or infrequently, gets a sense of our care for them. So I guess my response is, how frequent does it take to let them know that you care about them? Now, they're busy people, so they're not going to want you to talk to them every week. But once a month, once a quarter, meet with them face to face twice a year, 3 times a year, and then fill in the middle with real communication, because practically we can't be there all the time. If I can't visit all 80, well, I do visit all 80 patrons every year, but I can't visit them all multiple times.
Yeah, it's as you're speaking, I'm very much thinking about the more relational, transformational the thinking is around patrons and fundraising, the more reliant you have to be on the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
If it's transactional and systems, you're running a system.
Yeah.
And you send out your letters or whatever it is, you do your thing.
Yeah.
But it's a system.
Yeah.
But what you're describing creates a whole different grid of processing and discernment
Right.
around time, investment, who, when, what.
Yeah.
It's you're moving into a spiritual art
Yeah.
rather than a system and a science.
Yeah. Fundraising is an art, in my view, not a science. There are lots of fundraisers out there who treat it as that, and they're very successful. It's just it's not me, for one thing, and I don't think it's what it should be for the church. Not if we understand this idea of coherence, of this oneness, of this being together, that we actually share in life together. Let me just say that I engage in systems and processes that do not reflect what I've talked about today, and I know it. But
Okay.
I'm bringing myself and an organization along. And many of you who are either the primary fundraiser or the CEO have to bring an organization along to that destination. So again, that's what I'm saying. This is a destination, not something that's complete. So yes, continue with the procedures and the systems that you have in place, and then just slowly seek and understand how you shift those into away from more transactional to more relational. So it's not tomorrow we're starting a new, it just doesn't work that way because it has so much to do with us and our hearts.
Okay. One last question for you. So some of our audience will be, chief cook and bottle washer. So founder,
Sure.
fundraiser, right? The whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, Others may have someone whose leadership they're under.
Yeah.
So if you have the authority to decide your model of fundraising, well, then you're aligned because you're self-aligned.
Yeah.
But maybe address the piece of when PFI or other organizations you've been with have said, hey, come and help us. And you say, well, this is what I do. Address that conversation between you and the CEO about your philosophical alignment.
Right.
Because it would seem to me that that would be another tension point potentially as to how this works. Or do they, if it's a large organization, do they segment it out and go, okay, Greg, you do this, but we have our other folks who do the mass email lists or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So I've worked with a few charities over the years. Two of them accepted me just the way I am, including my current place at PFI. The one in the middle that didn't, that found it more difficult, I no longer work with, as you know. I resigned after a period of time because of just the cultivate the it just was not going to become the place where I could be what I felt I needed to be as a fundraiser. And that's fine because they eventually found somebody who did differently and that worked for them. But I want to underscore what I said from the very beginning. This is a lifelong journey of moving from what has been passed on to us, the systems and procedures and ways of doing that have been passed on to us into a place of more relational fundraising. And we always have the pressures. Again, it's holding that in both hands, the pressure of delivering and the desire for human relationship, belonging, meaning. And sometimes this wins out, and we have to go with that just until we can. So I do not have the depth of relationship or care or am able to give the attention that I would like to all 80 of the major donors that I deal with. But for those where I can, it does look like what I've defined.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, because we really have to embrace a philosophy of fundraising and a theology of fundraising. Like it's kind of
Yeah,
this package, right?
yeah,
And then that gets processed through our personality as well
yeah.
in how God's made us.
And again, not to be afraid, even though we're in a more systematic or procedural kind of fundraising, not to be afraid. Just continue on with what you have been doing, and then over time, don't feel a burden, don't feel a weight. Just see that, hey, I want to be life-giving in every meeting that I have. How do I start becoming that in one or two or three or four? And then slowly over time, see it grow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I met with a patron yesterday, and I said, and I go to church with him as well, but we don't necessarily
Right.
run into each other, on a regular, like a weekly basis. He's got his group, small group. I have mine, so on. But we met yesterday, so that's first time this year that we sat down, and I said, "Oh, how's it going?" He goes, "Well, my dad died in January. Uh, my wife's biological father died in was it February? My brother-in-law died in March, and in April, my nephew, 4-year-old nephew, went into sepsis and has pneumonia, double pneumonia, and his lungs are disintegrating, and he's in a medically induced coma. That he's starting to improve. So he says, I'm scared for May. Well, we're not talking about, you know, like we were together, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, and I prayed with them, and what we talked about, and it wasn't, I had given a thank you card and I said, by the way, the thing we talked about, it's happening, and I'll send you more info later. He goes, oh, good, glad to see it's going. And but that was it for that conversation because I'm
Yeah,
like, that's not the time or place for
right.
projects or anything. So
This
you don't know what you're walking into.
you don't, and you don't know what you're there for until you
Yeah.
see it. Um, I had one fundraiser who, this is a little bit of a different story, but just to give a sense of how there's a disconnect, who got a note from a foundation that had been supporting them, said, listen, we've had a downturn in our finances. We're not able to support you this year. And he wrote back a scathing letter
Mhm.
to the funder saying, do you know what this does to us and how this affects our ministry? Um, I've heard of that far too often, where donors are kind of pummeled for pulling their funding for whatever reasons they've had to. So this is real. We need to be present for them. We need to understand what's going on in their lives. And when things go bad, that has an effect on us, that we are alongside of them and not just trying to defend our needs and our turf.
Yeah. We had one more comment. I like what it said here, and then we'll wrap this up.
Sure.
So it sounds like it's much more fluid than the systems we want to define are, and I know your answer to this. Are you suggesting, therefore, get creative, become, and then act differently? I like that.
That is exactly right. But it
Yeah,
takes a while to become. So in the meantime, you've got pressures and responsibilities. But it's about the destination. Where are we headed? What direction do we want to be as an organization? Yeah.
that's great. Well, thank you so much, Greg. And
It is
this
a
will
total joy.
appreciate your time and your investment in this community. And of course, this will be available on our YouTube site. There will be people can watch this and track with it for those who couldn't be here today. We also have information about our next event, and here's a slide for that, I believe. Be with Dwayne Klein, the founder and principal at Klein Consulting out of the Hamilton region, and sustainable fundraising for small ministries. And so Dwayne works with multiple ministries and consults to them. And so we're looking forward for Dwayne's time with us. You can register or pass on registration if you want to invite other people to that. There's the link for that. And you can scan that QR code and pass it on to others that you may think would benefit from this. So again, thank you everyone for being with us. And thank you, Greg, so much for your presence, your posture, as someone noted um, in the chat, and for sharing your wealth of experience and knowledge with us. Appreciate it very much. So thanks for being with us, everyone. Have a great day. Goodbye.